Hi guys, I'm back tonight. I have a friend here with us, Sadie Kate. She wanted to listen to our book tonight too. So remember, we're finishing the Dinosaurs Before Dark, and it was written by Mary Pope Osborne. That's our author of this book. And last night we read the first 3 chapters, and we still have our friends here with us. T-Rex is listening to us, and our Stegosaurus is listening to us. And our Bronchiosaurus is listening to us talk about the dinosaurs. And so last night, remember, our friends Jack and Annie found a secret magic treehouse. And when they opened the book and started reading about the dinosaurs, it took them to the dinosaur land. And so that's kind of where we are caught up. They just met the pteranodon that is down at the bottom of the treehouse. So now we're going to start with chapter 4 called Henry. Jack gasped as Annie held out her hand. Oh, brother. She was always trying to make friends with animals, but this was going too far. Don't get too close to him, Annie, Jack shouted. But Annie touched the pteranodon's crest. She stroked his neck. She was talking to him. What in the world was she saying? Jack took a deep breath. Okay, he would go down too. It would be good to examine the creature, take notes like a scientist. Jack started down the rope ladder, and when he got to the ground, Jack was only a few feet away from the creature. The creature stared at Jack. His eyes were bright and alert. He's soft, Jack, said Annie. He feels like Henry. Jack snorted. He's no dog, Annie. Feel him, Jack, said Annie. Jack didn't move. Don't think, Jack, just do it. Jack stepped forward. He put out his arm very cautiously and brushed his hand down the creature's neck. Interesting. A thin layer of fuzz covered the pteranodon's skin. Soft, huh? Said Annie. Jack reached into his backpack and pulled out a pencil and a notebook, and he wrote, Fuzzy skin. What are you doing? Asked Annie. Taking notes, said Jack. We're probably the first people in the world to ever see a real live pteranodon. Jack looked at the pteranodon again. The creature had a bony crest on top of his head. The crest was longer than Jack's arm. I wonder how smart he is, Jack said. Very smart, said Annie. Don't count on it, said Jack. His brain's probably no bigger than a bean. No, he's very smart. I can feel it, said Annie. I'm going to call him Henry. And Jack wrote in his notebook, Small brain question mark. There's Jack and Annie with our pteranodon. Jack looked at the creature again. Maybe he's a mutant, he said. The creature tilted its head. Annie laughed. He's no mutant, Jack. Well, what's he doing here then? Where is this place? Said Jack. Annie leaned close to the pteranodon. Do you know where we are, Henry? She asked softly. The creature fixed his eyes on Annie. His long jaws were opening and closing like a giant pair of scissors. Are you trying to talk to me, Henry? Said Annie. Forget it, Annie, Jack wrote in his notebook. Mouth like scissors? Did we come to a time long ago, Henry? Asked Annie. Is this a place from long ago? Suddenly she gasped. Jack! He looked up. Annie was pointing towards the hill. On top stood a huge dinosaur. All right, that's it for chapter 4. Now we're going on to chapter 5. Gold in the Grass. Go, go, said Jack, and he threw his notebook into his pack. He pushed Annie towards the rope ladder. Bye, Henry, she said. Go, said Jack, and he gave Annie a big push. Quit it, she said. But she started up the ladder, and Jack scrambled after her. They tumbled into the treehouse. They were panting as they looked out the window at the dinosaur. He was standing on the hilltop, eating flowers off of a tree. Oh, man, whispered Jack. We are in a long time ago. The dinosaur looked like a huge rhinoceros, only he had 3 horns instead of 1. 2 long ones above his eyes, and 1 on his nose. He had a big shield-like thing behind his head. Triceratops, said Jack. Does he eat people? Whispered Annie. I'll look it up. Jack grabbed the dinosaur book, and he flipped through the pages. There, he said, and he pointed to a picture of a Triceratops, and he read the caption. The Triceratops lived in the late Cretaceous period. This plant-eating dinosaur weighed over 12,000 pounds. Jack slammed the book shut. Just plants, no meat. Then let's go see him, said Annie. Are you nuts? Said Jack. Don't you want to take notes about him? Asked Annie. We're probably the first people in the whole world to ever see a real live Triceratops. Jack sighed. She was right. Let's go, he said. And he shoved the dinosaur book into his pack. He slung it over his shoulder and started down the ladder. On the way down, Jack stopped. He called up to Annie. Just promise me you won't pet him. I promise. And promise me you won't kiss him. I promise. And promise me you won't talk to him. I promise. And promise you won't go, she said. So Jack went, and Annie followed. When they stepped off the ladder, the pteranodon gave them a kind look. Annie blew a kiss at him. Be back soon, Henry, she said cheerfully. Shush, said Jack, and he led the way through the ferns slowly and carefully. When he reached the bottom of the hill, he kneeled behind a fat bush. Annie knelt beside him and started to speak. Shush! Jack put his finger to his lips. Annie made a face. Jack peeked out at the Triceratops. The dinosaur was incredibly big, bigger than a truck. He was eating the flowers off of a magnolia tree. Jack slipped his notebook out of his pack and wrote, Eats flowers. Annie nudged him. Jack ignored her. He studied the Triceratops again, and he wrote, Eats slowly. Annie nudged him harder, and Jack looked at her. Annie pointed to herself. She walked her fingers through the air and then pointed to the dinosaur, and she smiled. Was she teasing? She waved at Jack. Jack started to grab her. She laughed and jumped away. She fell into the grass in full view of the Triceratops. Get back here, whispered Jack. Too late. The big dinosaur had spotted Annie. He gazed down at her from the hilltop. Half of a magnolia flower was sticking out of his mouth. Oops, said Annie. Get back here, Jack shouted at her. He looks nice, Jack. Nice? Watch out for his horns, Annie. No, he's nice, Jack. Nice? But the Triceratops just gazed calmly down at Annie. Then he turned and loped away, down the side of the hill. Bye, said Annie, and she turned back to Jack. See? Jack grunted, but he wrote in his notebook, Nice. Come on, let's look around some more. As Jack started after Annie, he saw something glittering in the tall grass. He reached out and picked it up. It was a medallion, a gold medallion. See, there's your Triceratops with the 3 horns on top. And then there's Jack with the gold medallion that he found. A letter was engraved on the medallion, a fancy M. Oh man, someone came here before us, Jack said softly. All right, that's it for chapter 5. Should we do one more chapter? We'll do chapter 6, called Dinosaur Valley. Annie, look at this, Jack called. Look what I found. Annie had gone up to the hilltop. She was busy picking a flower from the magnolia tree. Annie, look, a medallion. But Annie wasn't paying attention to Jack. She was staring at something on the other side of the hill. Oh, wow, she said. Annie! Clutching her magnolia flower, she took off down the hill. Annie, come back! Jack shouted, but Annie had disappeared. I'm going to kill her, Jack muttered. He stuffed the gold medallion into his jeans pocket. Then he heard Annie shriek, Annie! Jack heard another sound as well, a deep, bellowing sound, like a tuba. Jack, come here, Annie called. Annie! Jack grabbed his backpack and raced up the hill, and when he got to the top, he gasped. The valley below was filled with nests, big nests made out of mud, and the nests were filled with tiny dinosaurs. Annie was crouching next to one of the nests, and standing over her was a gigantic, duck-billed dinosaur. Don't panic, don't move, said Jack, and he stepped slowly down the hill towards Annie. The huge dinosaur was towering above Annie, waving her arms, making her tuba sound. Jack stopped. He didn't want to get too close. He knelt on the ground. Okay, move towards me. Slowly. he said, and Annie started to stand up. Don't stand, crawl, said Jack. Clutching her flower, Annie crawled towards Jack. The duck-billed dinosaur followed her, still bellowing, and Annie froze. Keep going, Jack said softly. Annie started crawling again. Jack inched farther down the hill until he was just an arm's distance away from Annie. He reached out and grabbed her arm, and he pulled Annie towards him. Stay down, he said. He crouched next to her. Bow your head and pretend to chew. Chew? Yes, I read that's what you do if a mean dog comes at you. He's no dog, Jack, said Annie. Just chew, said Jack. Jack and Annie both bowed their heads and pretended to chew. Soon, the dinosaur grew quiet. Jack raised his head. I don't think she's mad anymore, he said. Thanks, Jack, for saving me, said Annie. You have to use your brain, said Jack. You can't just go running to a nest of babies. There's always a mother nearby. Annie stood up. Annie! Too late. Annie held out her magnolia flower to the dinosaur. I'm sorry I made you worry about your baby, she said. The dinosaur moved closer to Annie. She grabbed the flower from her and reached for another. No more, said Annie. The dinosaur let out a sad tuba sound. Well, there are more flowers up there, said Annie, and she pointed to the top of the hill. I'll get you some. And Annie hurried up the hill. The dinosaur waddled after her, and Jack quickly examined the babies. Some were crawling out of the nests. Where were the other mothers? Jack took out the dinosaur book, and he flipped through the pages. He found a picture of some duck-billed dinosaur and read the caption. The Anatosauruses lived in colonies. While a few mothers babysat the nests, others hunted for food. So there must be more mothers close by. Hey, Jack, Annie called. Jack looked up. Annie was at the top of the hill feeding magnolia flowers to the giant Anatosaurus. She's nice too, Jack, said Annie. But suddenly, the Anatosaurus made her terrible tuba sound, and Annie crouched down and started to chew. The dinosaur barged down the hill. She seemed afraid of something. Jack put the book down on top of his pack and hurried up to Annie. I wonder why she ran away, said Annie. We were starting to be friends. Jack looked around. What he saw in the distance almost made him throw up. An enormous, ugly monster was coming across the plain. He was walking on two big legs and swinging a long, thick tail and dangling two tiny arms. He had a huge head, and his jaws were wide open. Even from far away, Jack could see his long, gleaming teeth. Tyrannosaurus Rex, whispered Jack. All right, that's the end of chapters 4, 5, and 6. And so tomorrow night, join me as we get to finish our book when we read chapters 7, 8, 9, and maybe we'll get to the last chapter 10. We'll see how much time we have. Thanks for joining me. Bye.